Hi, welcome to the Something New show where we like to learn how to live a life worth celebrating. I'm Mindi, your host, and today I have a special guest with me. Her name is Bri Stensrud, and she has a lot to share. I can't wait to dive in, and I'm going to start by just giving you a brief introduction about who she is. Bri is an author and speaker and human dignity advocate. Her passion is to inspire and equip people to engage more consistently and tangibly in holistic human dignity issues. Currently, she serves as the director of Women of Welcome, a project of world relief that invites women into conversations and experiences about immigrants and refugees from a non-partisan perspective. She writes Bible studies, hosts immersion trips across the southern border, and leads a community of over 150,000 women into deeper conversations about challenging yet important issues that affect the lives of vulnerable people, which that is totally Bri in a nutshell. And not only that, Bri, you are a mom, a wife, and a very busy one at that. She and I are actually friends in the same neighborhood. We are living life together. In fact, she even brought my kids home from school today so that I could be here at the show recording. So I so appreciate that. And I'm so glad we get to do this side by side in all the chaos. We are living it and serving people in our community. So let me just ask you a little bit more about Women of Welcome. Could you start there, Bri, and tell us about that?
Yes, and just funny thing today, picking up your kids from school. Today was Immigration Day at school.
Crazy.
And so Blake and Brody had all the conversations, and I filmed a little video that I'm going to show you later, and it was just hilarious. But they were talking about Immigration Day, which is just so interesting because Women of Welcome is a community of Christian women who want to dive deeper into that issue, and immigration feels like a very controversial, hot topic, and it doesn't need to be. Most people think about immigration as a political issue, and it really is a biblical issue. And there are political implications, but we don't need to start there as Christians. And so I'm informed by my faith. You and I are both believers, and so we want to look and care about and think about people from a biblically based perspective and start there first. So Women of Welcome is a group, it's a community of Christian women who just want to dive into this issue and want to do so to live out biblical hospitality in a way that honors God and creates life-changing welcome for very vulnerable people.
Wow. Okay, and what does your job look like there? I know that you do so many things, but tell me about it.
So our community mostly exists online, and we do three big things. We do encouragement, we do education, and we do equipping. So a lot of women who say, I care about this issue and I have compassion for immigrants and refugees, but I don't have a lot of confidence to speak up about it. There's an encouragement element that needs to happen. So what we want to do is we want to attach confidence to your compassion. And so when we do that, we encourage you, you're not alone. You're not crazy for having compassion and empathy for people at our southern border or around the world. This doesn't have to be an inflammatory conversation. It can be a really genuine and empathetic conversation, and you're not alone. So we do a lot of encouragement. We do a lot of education. So what does it look like to really translate a headline? You know, you have both sides of the issue really fighting for this political wedge, and we don't want to live there. So what does it look like to engage in conversations and read headlines and do so in a way that's gracious and that is compassionate, but that's full of conviction as well. And then, of course, there is the equipping. And so a lot of women are like, I don't really know how to use my voice. I've never called my elected official. I've never known what to say to my father-in-law. So it's a lot of like, how do you use your voice well, especially when you don't necessarily know a whole lot about the issue and all of kind of the pitfalls and the puddles that you can step into and that kind of subject matter. So part of that is getting close to people in your community, and part of that is getting close to people who are in those vulnerable situations. So we do take immersion trips across the border, and we meet with migrants, we meet with church leaders, we meet with Border Patrol. We spend a lot of time asking them questions, asking them what they need to secure the border, because we do want secure borders, but we also want humane treatment of people who we know are made in the image of God. And so we handle all of these things and hold that tension together in a community. So that involves writing Bible studies, that means taking immersion trips, that means having conversations online, speaking with experts or politicians. So it's a really big web.
And one thing I really like about you, Bri, is that you ask clarifying questions instead of just like taking things at face value. And so there's so many, like you said, of these topics that can be heated, that can be just quickly opinionated. But what I love and I've learned about from you is to really have a curiosity approach. And so when you go into these moments or these border trips or whatever, I don't really see you as like one side or the other. I just see you as a person that's like seeking clarification more and saying, okay, tell me more about this. Like what's really working, what's really not working. And you don't just have an opinion. You start to formulate information for people so that they can come to their own conclusions, which I think is really cool. I just love the curiosity factor. In fact, you even wrote a book, which I do want to mention on here because I think it's super important. It's called The Biggest, Best Light. So if you are watching on YouTube, you can see this really beautiful cover children's book here. And it's talking about shining God's love into the world around you. And I love this. I mean, I have kids in my own house that we have to talk about this, 4 of them in fact. So could you tell us briefly, like what was kind of your goal with this book?
So the biggest best light is about helping our kids understand how God sees people. And if we understand how God sees people, how he created people, which is he created them in his very image, what does it look like to see people that maybe we think are too different from us, or maybe they are really hidden in different pockets of life that we don't circulate in or exist in. And so part of that is seeing people as God does and then entering into those spaces and showing up well and loving people well. So just helping our kids see people better and see them as God does.
And I love that. And I mean, even the whole illustration of it is just so powerful because it's so representing, you know,
Yes.
of all the different
Yes.
people that we need to know and love. So that's pretty special. So, okay, Women of Welcome, what's going on right now? What do you have coming up with that?
Well, immigration never seems to leave the headlines, so it's always a constant up and down all the time. So, you know, just last weekend there was a caravan of migrants that rushed the border in El Paso, and so they kind of rushed through Mexican authorities and then our own U.S. government authorities and CBP and BP stopped that. And then so there's a million questions that arise from that. Are we being invaded? Why are they pushing through the border? Why isn't there an orderly process? Can't they just get in line? So there's a lot of questions that come from that, and it does stoke a lot of fear in people. So that's the headline last week, right? And so we help our community really understand what actually happened there. Why did that happen? And what can we do better? Right? Because we do need a safe and secure border, but we also know that those people are very, very desperate. And so what does it look like when freedom is that close, when opportunity is that close? It's literally just feet from you and you can see it. And you've been living in a border town for 3 months trying to get processed for an asylum case and it's ineffective and not working. And you get so desperate. What does that look like? What we're seeing is the desperation of people, at least along the southern border. And so a lot of our approach, week in, week out, whatever, is that we are meeting a humanitarian crisis with a military response. And that seems to be really the crux of why we're having so much angst at the border. And so, you know, that was last week. And so this week we're doing a lot of education and equipping about what really happened there. And then, you know, next week it'll probably be, you know, somebody introduced this bill in the House and somebody, you know, talked about this, or maybe something happened in the Northern Triangle, or maybe there's another earthquake in Syria. What does it look like? You know, when we had the Afghan lift out of Afghanistan, we had hundreds of thousands of Afghans that were needing to be resettled. Same with, you know, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What does it look like to show up well for the world's vulnerable when you're just here in a very safe community? What can you do? So from week to week, there's always something. There's always something to help Christian women, to help women understand what their role is. And you can't go and fly and into the other part of the world and do what some people can, but what can you do here? You know, because people are being resettled in your community, and some people need you to use their voice because their voice isn't uplifted or used. So from week to week, it changes for sure. Mm-hmm. In just a couple weeks.
No, go ahead.
You know, in 2 weeks, I'll be going down to the southern border with some of my colleagues at World Relief, and we'll be going down into Tijuana, and we will be talking with partner churches that are serving migrants there and learning about what are the things they really need us to advocate for. What are they seeing? What's different than what we're being told by cable news or by partisan platforms? What is really actually happening? So it really does change from week to week.
Yeah. Okay. This is kind of an interesting question, but as you have, you know, worked with this type of just content the last few years, what would you say the number one thing is that people don't know, that if they join your community, they're like, they keep telling you, I had no idea, fill in the blank. What would be something we would have no idea unless we were heavily engaged in the work that you're doing?
The both and, meaning we don't have to be on opposite sides. You don't have to choose. It generally and usually is both and. So a lot of people will say that if you have compassion towards immigrants and refugees, that means that you are for open borders. Well, no, we're not, actually, because open borders wouldn't be safe for people in America, and it wouldn't be safe for people on the other side of the border. So what does it look like to have border policies that actually create safety on both sides of the border, so that we're not creating like a human trafficking vacuum or nightmare going on? What does it look like to hold tension? So both things can be true. You can have safe and secure borders, and you can also be for humane treatment and more legal avenues for immigrants and refugees and for vulnerable people who need to find a new home, not because they want one, but because they need one, right? So I think the most surprising thing is that there is a charitability of conversation in our community. And so we have a discipleship about how that charitability is actually carried out. So a lot of people enter into really tough conversations with a lot of harshness and a lot of black and white. And so what we encourage is, come with your messy question, but we're not going to leave you where you are. So I don't have any agenda to get you from point A to point Z. So if you come into a conversation about immigrants and refugees, I don't actually have some kind of like marketing funnel I'm trying to get you to. I'm literally just wanting to not leave you where you are. So I want to have a charitability for how you're going to show up. You might show up with some really maybe hate-filled or bigoted, maybe racist, maybe really harsh questioning that maybe you don't even actually know are that way, but you just don't have the language to talk about it in a better way. I'm going to allow you to show up in a messy way, and I'm going to give a charitability to that conversation and say, you know what, I think we can do this better, and I think you actually want to talk about this better because that's why you're here. So let's have that conversation, and we're doing that. So I'm giving you dignity in that, and that you are also staying curious and staying connected to the conversation. You're not being turned off by something. So,
well, I think you're saying to always assume positive intent.
Yes.
It's like, this is coming from a good place. There's concern for something.
Mm-hmm.
There's love for someone
Mm-hmm.
that you're either trying to protect or preserve,
Mm-hmm.
whether
Yeah.
either side.
Yeah.
And I think if you enter these hard conversations with that in mind, you can get a lot farther, right?
Yeah, and it also just goes back to seeing people as God does. If everybody is made in the image and likeness of God, what does it look like to treat people as image bearers? Even people you don't disagree with, even people who show up in messy ways, what does it look like to stay curious about that person? What are they actually really asking under the question? So if you're coming in and you're asking me something, I'm actually really more curious as to why you're asking that question. Because the question is really just the surface level of maybe something else that's really brewing underneath. So it's likely, usually in my community, it's likely based out of fear. So it's like, we need to have safe borders. I'm immediately thinking, it's not necessarily about safe borders. She's afraid for safety reasons. So what does that look like to honor her and address her fear and just say, you know what, I actually am concerned about safety issues too. Like, I think that's a very big deal, and we have to have safe and thorough vetting. We have to be, that's a must-have. But does it have to be to the detriment of, fill in the blank? So I think there's a charitability and a curiosity about people that we have to have in order to have really good conversations, and then disciple people into how they can have good conversations.
Right. Okay, I want you to tell us about the 4 things that you feel like are major themes in your life right now that you're like, this is really hitting me. And this is more personal,
Yeah.
But I'm really excited for you to tell us about that. But before we hop into that, tell us, where can we find out more?
So Women of Welcome is on all the socials, really. And so Facebook, Instagram, we have a private Facebook group. And so on our public Facebook group, you'll get a lot of our content. But in our private Facebook group, that's where you can actually go and ask questions without fear of being trolled. without fear of like retribution for whatever question that you're asking. So I would say if you have a lot of questions and you're sincerely wanting to know more, our private group is a really safe group. There's about 5,000 women in that group, and they are all there to learn, and they ask questions in messy ways, and then they get help in helpful ways. Instagram is another really good place. We have a YouTube channel with all of our videos, and then of course womenofwelcome.com. I'm at Bri.Stens on Instagram, and then Women of Welcome on Instagram. So
Great. Okay. So let's hop over to those personal things, those 4 themes that you're seeing in your life right now. Because like I said, Bri and I have lived a lot of life together, from living in a hospital for different family members at the same time years ago, to small group, to business, to book launches, to carpool.
Yes.
I mean, it is all the things. And it's so really neat that I have other working moms in my life that are doing really purposeful work, because I do feel like that's the reason why I work as well, is just to bring purpose to the world. So it's really cool to see both of us doing that in our own lane. But tell us the 4 things that are really themes of your life right now that you've been sharing with me. I just think it would be great for our listeners.
So these are kind of like 4 major things that I rally my kids around, that I rally my people around, my team around. And they're just constant mantras that I really tell my kids and myself. And these are really things that require discipline. And so the first thing is see people first. So it's always just see people first. So if someone's giving you a hard time, someone looks a certain way, someone's acting a certain way, someone is responding in a certain way, what would it look like to see them as a person first? Not seeing what they wear, not seeing the worst thing about them, not assuming things about. What if you just saw them as a human being first and foremost? So we all know that we are better, and we are all more than the worst thing that's ever happened to us, the worst thing we've ever done, the worst outfit we've ever worn, the best job we've ever had. No matter what that is, we are all people first. So having a charitability for someone that you encounter and remaining curious about them helps us see people first. And just having that perspective that each and every person is made in the image of God. So when we think about what that means, what does that mean? That means that there is an inherent goodness. That means that there is an inherent purpose. Everybody has potential. And so no matter what situation or circumstance that they're in right now, seeing them as a person first that is made with potential, made with promise, made in the image of God, how would that change your perception and your interaction with them? You'd probably treat them very differently, right?
Yeah.
The next thing is what we just talked about a little bit, is to stay curious. I'm always telling my daughter, she comes from school and she's having a really hard day. So-and-so was mean to me, so-and-so bullied me, so-and-so, and she's just upset about it. I said, why do you think that's happening? I want you to start asking some good questions. It's like, well, she really hurt me and she did this. I'm like, if that's happening, I want you to stay curious. I'm really sorry that happened. I'm not trying to
excuse that behavior.
Yeah, I'm not. Nope. I'm acknowledging her feelings about it, and that's hard, but I want her to press in. I don't want her to shut down. I don't want her to use her feelings as her driver. What I want her to use is her God-given ability to care about people and to say, all right, this was really hurtful. Why do you think she's in a state in which that's how she shows up in the world? And there have been a couple instances where I've just really asked her to stay and lean. I said, it's going to be a little bit hard, but I really want you to stay curious. I want you to try to think about some good questions that you might have that she might never have a conversation with you about.
Yeah, well, and always, I think it's important for our kids to know, like, usually people's behaviors are coming from a place of whether that's hurt or something like that, but you can have a lot more grace for their friends, or they can have more grace for their friends when you're like, hey, they're actually going through a tough time.
Yeah.
This might be the best they can show up.
Yeah.
Like assuming that is their absolute best that they're capable of right now, given their circumstances, but you don't know their circumstances unless you stay curious.
Yeah. So stay curious. So don't stay in your hurt state. Don't stay in your offended state, stay curious. And usually when we stay curious, we start to find out, it's very humbling to stay curious, because you feel very entitled, you feel very defensive, you can feel very prideful about like, well, at least I'm not like that person, or I'm not showing up like that, or, but if you stay curious and you actually find out what's going on with somebody and you care enough to find out what's going on, be patient in that way, you can usually find out some very humbling things where you're like, man, I'm so glad I didn't respond back in the way that my flesh and my feelings wanted me to. I mean, so many times, when my daughter's come home from school and something's been really hard at her and it's very hurtful for her, we'll find out weeks later, that girl's, her parents are getting a divorce. That person, her mom's being abused or whatever that is. And I'm like, it doesn't excuse the behavior, hon. But what it does do is it gives you a compassion that you probably didn't have for that person. And then that gives you a motivation to be more loving to that person.
Yeah.
So
third.
See people first, stay curious. The next one is show up. I have a hat that I have that was given to me by Lisa Whittle, who is a great motivator and ministry friend. She would be great on the show. But it's about just show up. Just show up. However you can. You might not know how to show up, but just show up. So if you staying curious, asking the right questions, seeing people first allows for you to be thinking about ways for you to show up for people. Show up for that friend who made a small nod. Show up for somebody that didn't even ask for you to show up. What does it look like to just be present in other people's lives? And sometimes that's going to cost you something. Sometimes you're not going to be able to hang out and do fun things that you want to do. Sometimes you're going to miss something that you really think is important. But showing up for other people and doing it imperfectly, I think is a really important thing, especially for Christians to really show what the grace and gospel of God is that I'm going to show up for you. I mean, if something's going on in your life and I've got a lot going in my life, I'm going to tell you to lean in and still try to show up in any way you can for that person.
And I got to say, you're not just talking about this, Bri. Anybody who knows you knows that you show up in the middle of the night or on the, Saturday morning when there was a house fire or whatever it might be. Literally, I can think of a million examples of how you've showed up, and you totally do it at the cost of sleep, at the cost of money, at the cost of whatever it may be. You literally, as soon as there's a situation, whatever that situation may be, you are there. And I just admire it so much. I think I was bad at that until I went through my own personal crisis, right, with my son years ago. And when all these people showed up for me, I was like, wow, I had no clue how much help I really needed. And after that experience, it changed me to be much more aware to any situation going on, whether I know the person or not. If there's anything I have to give or offer, like you said, imperfection, no matter what, you just show up. So, I mean, that could be as simple as people took my dogs when I didn't even realize it'd been days before somebody had checked on them. It's just when crisis happens, other people think through, how do they practically need me to show up for them right now? And if we can be a little bit more not in our own selves and, head down, what's in my life, but actually looking up and around, that's exactly what you model. You are always looking around. I've never met someone that looks around more, that is saying, hey, how can I show up for that person, even if I don't know them, but I heard about their circumstance and I have a way to help. So
yeah, and it can be really personally showing up. And I think it can also be there's been weeks where you're like, man, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. And it's you know what? I have zero time to do this, and it's probably going to make me late to do this. But you know what? I know I've already put in my phone Mindy's favorite drink. I'm going to go drop it off at the shop. I'm not even going to see her. I'm just going to drop it off, hand it to her assistant, and be like, just give this to Mindy. She probably could use it today. I got to run. And then I go. It's very small way. I'm taking 15 minutes out of my day to do something just really small to show up. Or it could be you're showing up with your voice somewhere for someone. And a lot of times people get debilitated by this action point. They're like, I don't really know how to show up, and I feel like that might be the wrong thing to say or do. I guarantee you, just showing up and just putting yourself forward like that is sometimes all people need. You don't even have to say anything. You're like, I'm just going to
drop off some spaghetti.
Yeah. Or you know what? I've had a friend, she was going through a really hard time, and she didn't think me coming into the house was actually going to be super helpful. So what I did is I just texted her. I said, I'm walking up and down your street right now praying for you. You don't even have to come outside. You don't have to see me. I just want you to know you're not alone. And she was like, you drove all the way out to my house and you're just walking up and down. I'm like, yeah. I would want someone to do that for me. And I wouldn't want to have to ask because I don't even know what I need or what I want.
It is so hard to ask when
Right.
you're going through a hard time. You don't know even the clarity of what you need to ask for.
Yeah.
And then to ask makes you feel even more vulnerable, and you're like, it's just too much.
And then if someone
it's too
doesn't
much.
show up after you ask, then you just feel like, oh, okay, I shouldn't be asking. So when you
Right.
put yourself out there and no one shows up, people start to turn inward, and then it's like, people don't like me. I guess I'm too much. I'm too much of a mess. I'm whatever. And it's like, no, people first. Stay curious, show up as much as you can, even at the sacrifice of your own comfort or your own finances
Sleep.
or your sleep. I mean, I don't, you keep mentioning sleep. When do we
Because
sleep? I don't
I
think
know,
we sleep for
Bri,
years. We
you
haven't
do-
slept for a decade, have we?
I mean, I still remember when you got the call that you were the chosen parents for someone that wanted to give their baby up for adoption. And you were just the night before, you were at my house because I was about to have a baby, and we were not reorganizing. I had just moved into a house, and I was very pregnant. I was 9 months pregnant, was due any day. And I was unpacking boxes, and you were helping me put away stuff in my kitchen in boxes and set up what I was about to do with my new baby. And literally the next night you call me and you're like, guess what? I'm about to have a baby too. I just got a call that there's a mom in a hospital right now who has chosen my husband and I to be her new parents of her baby. So we literally, you're like, do you want to go down to Babies R Us or whatever? We just started putting together the plan of in the next 24 hours, you were going to, so here, normal parents have 9 months.
Oh, I didn't have anything.
You didn't even have hours. You were like called and you were there.
She was in labor.
She was in labor, and I was like, "Oh,
you want to
it's
do
now.
this?
The time is now. We are becoming parents again right now." So I just still remember just being able to on the fly. Both we just no matter the time of night, we figure it out, and I just love that about you because I think it's really really unique. It's special. It's being willing to be uncomfortable, or I should say this, inconvenienced.
Oh, I mean, that's all what show up is about, is that you are being inconvenienced for the sake of someone else.
Mm-hmm. And you just have to let convenience go.
You have to be intentionally inconvenienced because you will not choose inconvenience. Because a lot of us in our lives right now, we're just very good at navel gazing. It's like, here we are. This is where we exist.
Yep.
And so it's like, all right, my life is busy. My life is going, I've got this. So we're just
Doing the thing.
But seeing people first, staying curious, asking the good questions, and then choosing to be intentionally inconvenienced so that you can show up well for people it's hard, but it's so good. It's so good. And it's how.
And I think I want to point something out. I think that's why our friendship has worked is because not only are we choosing to be inconvenienced, but we know truly deep down that if I ask for something, it's like, I know you're not going to be mad at me for being inconvenienced because you actually do want to help. And like vice versa, like whenever I've been able to help you, which you've definitely helped me more than I've helped you. But when you ask me, I think you know that about me, that I'm like, I'm not going to say yes and resent you for it. Like I really do want to help. So when I can help, it's like, it's a full on yes. I will be inconvenienced, but I don't mind because I care about you and your friendship matters more than being inconvenienced. And so having the reciprocity as well in saying, okay, she's going to not just say yes to being inconvenienced, but you're not going to make me feel bad for being inconvenienced. Like you genuinely want to help. So I think make sure too that as a friend that you're receiving that and giving it in the same manner. You know. Okay, what's the fourth thing?
The last thing is fight for the relationship or fight for the friendship. And this one I think is probably one of the biggest disciplines. And that is you're going to go through seasons in your life where people are going to show up in a funky way, and so are you, and people are going to say things that offend you. And what we always are wanting to do, at least for Christians, is that we are fighting for the unity and the bond of peace, and that as far as it is with you, be at peace with everyone. That doesn't mean you're going to agree with everybody, but what it means is that you are going to fight for that relationship. So you didn't show up or you didn't come to something that was really important to me, or this happened, or your kid did this to mine, or your husband in this business venture or whatever. It's like, what is the most important thing? The most important thing is the relationship. So what does it look like to actually fight for the relationship? Because when you're fighting for the relationship, it's not always going to be even. It's not this tit for tat thing. It's not like, okay, you do 50 and I do 50. Sometimes fighting for the relationship with someone that you don't like or someone that you do like is going to require much more of you than it will of that person. So it's like choosing. So how do you fight for the relationship? Choosing to not be offended. Being offended takes up so much energy. So I'm going to choose to not be offended. I'm going to choose to not believe this is about me until someone tell me it's about me. I'm going to think the best of her. So I'm going to be charitable in the way that I think about you. So you know what? Like, she didn't show up very well today, and that really hurt my feelings. You know what? Like, all right, well, I'm going to think the best of her because I know she'd probably want to show up better, and she didn't. So I'm going to take the emotion out of it and just take what's true. So it's like, leave the emotion, take what's true. So what's true is she's a great person. What's also true is that she did not show up well, and she hurt my feelings today. But what do I know? So like, I'm hurt, that's my feeling, but what do I know? What do I know? I know that she would rather show up a different way. So this is probably the best way she could show up today. So there's something else going on in her life. I'm staying curious, I'm asking questions, I'm trying to see her instead of the way that she showed up just as a person. And so I'm constantly trying to think of, all right, I'm not going to be easily offended. I'm also going to stay curious about her, and I'm also going to give her the benefit of the doubt and just say, you know what, she's not going to show up perfect, and neither am I, but this is probably the best way she could show up today. And so I'm going to just have some grace for that. And that way I can maintain the relationship instead of allowing hurt to really start to build, and then just, you keep short accounts, If it's really that big of a deal, have the conversation. But most of the time, people are just trying to show up the best way that they can. So fight for that friendship, fight for that relationship beyond maybe what they even knew that they were bringing to the table.
Those are awesome. Those are awesome 4 themes that we should all be talking to our kids about, for sure. Okay, I want us to pull out your favorite drink. And I'm going to ask you to tell us.
Have you ever had this?
No. What are we drinking today?
Okay, so, your video production guy, Drew, when he was filming something for me, this was in his studio. And it was like the best thing I'd ever tasted after 5 days of filming. I'm like, where is this amazing thing from? Trader Joe's. So sparkling black tea with peach juice.
Wow, and it's only 15 calories?
Oh, I didn't even look at that. Good
well,
for
I'm
you.
just saying, that's amazing.
3 carbs.
For a sparkling drink that's flavored, not just LaCroix, bubbly clearness.
It's got a little something in it.
It's got a little something. I like it. Well, I'm going to try this black tea with peach juice from Trader Joe's, sparkling. And I'm so glad you're on the show.
Are they going to sponsor the show?
Cheers. We got to do cheers.
Cheers. Yes,
I love
we're
it.
in the cheers shop. Thank you for having me, Mindy.
Absolutely. Well, those were some great topics to chat about. I'm so glad that you came on the show. Thanks for making the time for us. And again, if you liked it or have some questions or comments, definitely leave them below. Subscribe, tell your friends. But we are so glad you joined us today on the Something New show, where we like to learn how to live a life worth celebrating. So today was really special. Thanks for being here, Bri.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow the Something New show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.